Good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of Investigators in Cars Drinking Coffee. I'm your host. Hello.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. I'm your host, Mark Mernan, licensed private investigator, certified fraud examiner, and what else? Oh yeah, certified legal investigator. Almost forgot my credentials.
Don't forget
And
those.
I'm joined once again by Wendy Straw Mernan, partner, business partner, wife, all around great gal. How about that? Licensed private investigator, certified paralegal. And Wendy, today we are talking about a very serious topic.
We are.
And it is the subject of due process.
Oh, okay.
And okay, what do you mean okay? You're the one who thought. It was her idea here. But we're going to talk, I think in light of some very serious circumstances in our nation right now, there is a lot of unrest, a lot of concern about injustice based upon some actions that were taken, some very serious offenses. And we thought today that we would address the issue of the role of the private investigator in the due process process. And so why don't you start off? What is when we say due process? What is due process?
Well, I actually had to look this up, even though I'm a criminal defense investigator.
I know.
But according to the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And then the 14th Amendment applied that to each state also.
So at this federal level and at the state level, no person, no matter how unpopular, how terrible the crime, no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or the deprivation of property without due process.
That's right.
And as investigators, now we're not attorneys. We don't play one on television.
No?
No, we're really, but we are private investigators, and we have specialized in criminal defense.
Mm-hmm.
Me for 35 years, Wendy for almost 20. And we have worked on literally hundreds of cases, and some of them with some really notorious facts.
Yes.
We have 2 death penalty cases right now. These are terrible crimes, and yet as investigators we work for the defense attorneys to provide a defense for those people.
Right.
And
because they are protected by the Fifth Amendment.
Yeah, because we are a nation of laws.
Yes.
And what is it that we try to prevent? What's the alternative to due process?
Well, we would be living in a totalitarian police state where they could just come pick you up, you'd be charged with anything, and there would be no due process, no investigation. They just charge you, period.
And you sit in jail until the dictator or whoever's in charge determines you can go out, or they put you to death. Something
Yes.
similar to North Korea, the Chinese Communist Party, sadly again, the Soviet or the Russian government in places. I mean, totalitarian governments do not have due process.
No.
But in America, in the United States, we cherish these liberties.
We do.
And we work hard to preserve them. And I think what we're trying to avoid essentially is what we would call a rush to judgment.
Right.
And so as private investigators, what are some of the things that we do to help attorneys with individuals charged with very serious crimes?
Well, sometimes we get the case before they are actually charged and filed. The state attorney will file it. And then we provide services to show that there is no probable cause, which we may get into, for charging them for the crime. And sometimes that takes months before the state, if there's any doubt in their mind, they will not press charges. They have to be sure that they have enough reasonable, evidence. So
and it has to come to a point. You mentioned a probable cause, and a probable cause affidavit is the sworn testimony of a police officer or a law enforcement officer as to specific facts related to the offense.
Right.
I'm just thinking of a DUI manslaughter where an individual is charged with running a red light, who is intoxicated, striking the side of a vehicle, broadsiding a vehicle in the intersection, killing an individual or even 2 or 3 people in the car, and the family wants justice for their lost loved one.
Right.
And yet it takes sometimes weeks and months before the law enforcement is conducting their investigation. to include the toxicology screen, include the analysis of the crash itself. We call them traffic homicide reports. The traffic homicide investigation can take months.
Yes, those really take a long time.
And so you have certain situations in a DUI manslaughter where the crime takes events 1 year, and a year and a half later they bring charges against the individual who may have been the drunk driver.
Yeah.
And
they're safeguards.
There are
These are all
safeguards.
safeguards because it says it balances the power of the law of the land and protects the individual from it.
Yeah.
So it's protecting us from, an abuse of authority by our government.
Yeah. And what's the alternative? We talked about a totalitarian government. The other alternative is anarchy.
Right.
And the only thing scarier than an injustice is anarchy, where there is no law.
Yeah.
Where there is no restraint, and vigilantes go out and carry out justice like your classic superhero. He's going to go out and make it right, but we don't operate in that scenario, do
No,
we?
we do not.
And actually, we should be grateful for that.
Exactly. Yes.
And so we've had a very long career helping attorneys in some really, really horrific crimes, and the victim has suffered, the victim may be deceased, and his or her family is seeking justice, and yet the pace of due process is slow, isn't it?
It is slow. It is slow.
And that gives us time to do our job. The state has their job, the federal government has their job, and then the defense has their job as well to protect the rights of the individual. And again, not because we want to see bad guys get off or bad people get off. No, it's for the cause of justice itself, that you cannot eliminate injustice by engaging in injustice. So, pretty heavy topic.
It is.
Yeah, we've got trial dates set up. We got our own pretty serious, very serious case pending ourselves. But just thought we would take a few minutes and explain from the investigator standpoint, and what are some of the things we do for attorneys in situations like this?
Well, we review all the reports with a fine-tooth comb. We gather, we make evidence lists, witness lists. We make sure we have everything they say they have. We're entitled to every piece of evidence they have. We keep them all honest, that's all. We just keep it honest. They've got a good case against our client. The jury makes the right decision and the sentencing is just. But we just keep the system honest. We're not, trying to get everybody freed.
No. And there are cases of terrible injustices which we've involved in where the client was actually exonerated and charges were dropped.
Yes.
Based upon evidence that we were able to find that wasn't found prior to the investigation.
Yes. We had one client looking at the death penalty, and he was completely the wrong person.
Yeah. Completely exonerated.
Yeah.
That was very sweet. We had another individual convicted of a road rage, armed, aggravated battery with a firearm. He was exonerated. The charges were dropped against him as well. So, it does happen. Now, most of the time,
they get what they deserve.
They get what they deserve. And
fairly.
But justly, yeah. There was no rush to judgment.
Yeah.
And I think in a heated and very, very heated time that we're in right now, we want to avoid a rush to judgment. So even an individual charged with a heinous crime where there's lots of evidence indicating that the individual is guilty, he or she is still entitled to a defense. And that is the job of a defense attorney and a good defense investigator.
Right, and if they make a mistake and they charge somebody erroneously, any evidence they had was all suppressed.
All suppressed.
And that case is over, so they have to be super careful. And these police officers are signing notarized affidavits, probable cause affidavits. Yeah. And so they have to be very careful. They take it seriously. I have the utmost respect for them. It's a big job. They have to present it to the prosecutor, and
Principal William Blackstone, I believe, said it here: better 100 guilty go free than one innocent suffer.
True.
And that's hard to hear sometimes if you have been the victim of a crime or have lost a family member. But better 100 guilty go free than one innocent suffer. And I think that's part of what the criminal justice system is about.
Yeah, it's your family member.
Yep.
You want a just system, believe me.
You want a just system.
And most of us have had some family member involved in the criminal justice system, especially nowadays. So, yeah.
Anyway, it's a somber topic, and our prayers are for those families who have suffered the loss, and we pray that the justice system would remain in place, that we might not have a rush to judgment, but that in due season, in due time, due process, that the right solution, or the best solution possible in a fallible system, occurs. So that's our thought with you today, and we will see you again on our next episode of Investigators in Cars Drinking Coffee. Thanks for joining us again, folks.
Have a good weekend.